Hi guys, Dennis here, and welcome to my series on iOS development. In this video, we'll explore how to use UI local notifications. Just so you know, there are two types of notifications used in iOS. Local, which we'll cover in this video, and push, which is a subject for another video. So what's the difference, you ask? Well, local notifications are scheduled by an application and delivered on the same device, whereas push notifications are sent by a server to the Apple push notification service, which then pushes the notification to the device. So I suggest reading Apple's documentation on push notifications for more information. So local notifications are ideally suited for calendar events such as birthdays and anniversaries, or for general reminders of tasks or activities, and that's what we're going to build in this video. Our app will let the user enter unique text describing what the reminder is, and using a UI date picker, select the date and time for the reminder to fire off a notification. And just so you know, when a notification fires, up to 3 things can happen. An alert or banner can be displayed, the application's icon can show a badge, and it can even play a sound. And we're going to cover all of this and more. So let's get started. Okay, let's open up Xcode. And we're going to create a new Xcode project. And we're going to start off with an empty application. And we'll call our project Local Notifications. And we can leave the class prefix blank, but make sure devices have been set to iPhone. And we'll click Next and Create. And we have our project. So first off, let's go ahead and add a storyboard. And that'll be under User Interface. Select Storyboard. And make sure device family once again has been set to iPhone. And we're going to call this Main Storyboard. Click Create. And then we'll jump over to our app.delegate.m file, and under the first method, application did finish launching with options. Now that we're using the storyboard, we don't need all this code, excluding the return statement, so we're going to delete all that. Now we'll jump back over to our project, and under deployment information, using the main interface drop-down box, let's select Main Storyboard. So while we're in our project navigator, let's go ahead and add the class files that we'll need. So once again, new file. This time we'll select Cocoa Touch, Objective-C class, and we need 2 class files. And the first one will be a subclass of UI Table View Controller, and we'll call this View Reminders. Let's capitalize Reminders. View Reminders Table View Controller, and that'll be, as I said, a subclass of UI Table View Controller. Click Next and Create, and we need one more. So new file, Objective-C class, Next, and this class will be called Add Reminder View Controller, and this will be a subclass of UI View Controller, so we'll need to make that change. Very important. Click Next and create once again. Okay, let's go back to our storyboard, and now we're ready to start building out our interface. And the first thing that we'll need is an instance of UI Table View Controller. So let's drag that guy over, and we'll embed that in a navigation controller, and that'll give us our nav bar. And we can put a title in, and our title will be View Reminders. We'll need a bar button, so let's do a search for that. And where'd you go? There it is. And we'll drag that guy up there. And we'll change the identifier to a plus, which will give us, or an add, which will give us a plus symbol. And while we're here, let's go ahead and click on the table view cell and change the style from custom to subtitle. And that's going to give us 2 placeholders for text information, for strings that we're going to be using, so that's very important. Let's go ahead and shrink this down, and now we need an instance of UI view controller, so let's grab that, and we can go ahead and create our segue, and we know how to do that. From the plus, control drag, release, and we'll make this a modal segue. And while we're here, let's click on our segue identifier and change the transition style to flip horizontal. I think that's a fun transition. Let's embed this in a navigation controller as well, giving us our nav bar. And we'll entitle this controller Add Reminder. Now we need 2 bar buttons on this guy. And there's one. And there's the other. And this first guy will change its identifier to cancel. And the second one will change to save. Like so. Okay, now we need an instance of date picker. So let's just do a search for pick, and there's our date picker. Let's drag that onto our view controller. Next thing we need is a label, and we're going to use this label as a visual separator, and you'll see what I mean here in just a moment. So let's just drag that right about there. And while we're here, let's go, well, first of all, let's get rid of the text here. Let's delete the text, and then we'll go down under View, and we'll look for the background property, and we'll change that to, let's use a red, make it really stand out. Next, let's go up to our size inspector, and let's change that around a little bit. And I think we'll make the X about 20, and we'll use the Y as 283, and we'll make the width, that should be about 280, and the height we'll make as 12. Now we need a label, and we already have that selected, so let's drag that up, and we'll go back over to our attributes inspector, and we're going to change this text to enter reminder. Now we'll need to expand that out so we get all the text here, and then we'll just center it. And then we'll center the text as well, make it look good. And the last thing we need on this view controller is a text box that we'll use to enter our reminder text. And let's put that right about there. And let's widen that up a little bit so we can fit a good message in there, and we'll center that as well. Let's go ahead and build and run and see what we have here. Oh, you know what? Before we do that, it's one other thing that we want to do before we forget. Let's start with our view reminder view controller. We need to assign the class file to it, and we'll use the identity inspector under custom class, and this will be the view reminders table view controller. And then under the add reminder, we'll do the same thing here, and that will be assigned to the add reminder class file. Okay, now we can build and run, see what we have. And we have our table view. Let's click our plus, and we have our date picker. Looks good. Our label looks good. Enter reminder label and our text box. However, it looks like if we click in our text box, it's going to be covered by our keyboard, which it is. But before we make any changes to the size inspector, let's stop this build, and we'll go to the scheme and change that to iPhone 4-inch and see if that takes care of that problem. Let's build and run again. And once again, their table view. And this looks much better. I think if we click in here, okay, I think we're good now. Okay, I think we're ready to start adding our property, so let's go ahead and close that out. And we'll start with our add reminder, and we'll close out our panel and open up our assistant editor. And we'll make sure that our header is selected. And let's give ourselves some room here. And first thing we'll do is add our command buttons. So there's our cancel, and this is an IB action called cancel. We'll change the type to our UI bar button. There's one. Now we need a save. That's an action, and this is save, connect, and now we need a property for our date picker, and this will just be date. Actually, let's change that to just plain picker. Connect, and then last but not least, we'll do a property for our text box, and this will be called enter text. And I think we're done. So we can go ahead and close out all these panels here, and let's jump over to our view reminders table view controller implementation file, and we can code that. And our first stop is going to be under the view will appear, and we'll probably have to add that, and we do. So let's go ahead and add that method, and there it is. And we need a couple of curly braces. And what we want to do here is be able to reload the data every time the table appears. So we do that with the self.table view reload data. And by adding this, that way when we close our add reminder and go back to the view reminders table view, it'll automatically update and show that new addition. So that's very important. So next stop is off to our table view data source methods, and the first one is the number of sections in the table view. And since we'll only be using one section, we'll just get rid of our warning here, and we'll return 1. Very simple. Next, the table view number of rows in section. Let's get rid of our warning once again. And so to determine the number of rows in our section, we invoke the shared application of the UI application class and use the scheduled notifications property with the parameter count. So how we write that is we do a return, and then we need a couple of brackets here. Actually, we need 3 brackets, and the UI application, and then we call the shared application, and then we get the scheduled notifications, and then we use the parameter count, like so. And finally, we need to code our self-arrow at index path method. So let's scroll this up and tackle that guy. And the first thing that we're doing is defining a cell identifier, which is already written out for us in this line of code. And while we're here, we should jump back over to our main storyboard and open up our view reminder, go to our utilities panel, and make sure that that cell identifier has been set to capital CELL. There, we got that done. Let's jump back over to our M file and close out our utilities panel. And then the next line of code is used to dequeue and reuse cells, and that's already taken care of for us. So the next thing we need to do is we need to create an array which will hold all of our notifications, and we get those notifications from what's called our shared application. So let's go ahead and write that out. So we want an NS array, and we're just going to call this array our notifications array, and we do that. We need a double bracket. UI application, as I indicated, we're going to go to our shared application, and we're just going to call scheduled notifications. This is going to gather up all the notifications that we've scheduled and populate it into this array that we've just created here. Okay, now we need to create what's called UI local notification, and we need to do this for each object in each row of our array. So we'll use a UI local notification, and we're just going to call this notification, and we need a bracket, and we do a notification array. And as I indicated, this will be an object at index path dot row. Okay, so now we can populate our cell, and the first thing we'll populate is the text label, and we'll populate that with the alert body property of our notification. And I'll go into what an alert body is once we start coding our add reminder view controller. So we need a cell dot text label, and we'll use the set text method, and as I indicated, we call the notification, and we do the property alert body. And the last one is that we'll populate our detailed text label with the fire date property of our notification. And as I indicated, I'll explain what the alert body and the fire date properties are in more detail once we start coding our add reminder view controller. So let's go ahead and we'll do a cell.detailed text label, and once again we'll use the set text method, and this time we're going to need a bracket, and we call notification dot fire date, but we have to use the description method here, so we'll throw that in like so. And then finally we return the cell. Okay, so we're finished coding our table view. So now whenever we add a reminder, which is going to include a message and a fire date, in other words, the date and time that message is supposed to fire, it'll be included in our table view. So now we're ready to jump over to the add reminder view controller implementation file and do the remaining code that we need to do. So let's jump over there now. And the first thing we should do is code our cancel method, since that's the easiest thing. So let's scroll down and find that guy. And there it is. So all we do here is do a self dismiss modal view controller, yes, with the nil. Okay, let's go ahead and build and run and make sure that cancel action is working here. And we'll open up our view controller and we'll hit the cancel button, and that works. So okay, good for that. So now it's on to the save method, where we're going to be adding just about all the rest of the code that we're going to need to create our notification. So let's scroll down there, and we're going to need a lot of room here, so let's give ourselves some room. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is to create an instance of NSDate, and we're going to grab what we need from our date picker. So let's start off with NSDate, and we're just going to call this picker date, and we get that with a self dot picker date. Next, we need to create an instance of UI local notification. Remember, we did the same thing in the table view. So we do a UI local notification, and we're going to call this local note. We'll just abbreviate here, local notif. And we need a couple of brackets, and this is going to be UI local notification, and we alloc, and we initialize. Now we can set all the notification details, and the first one we're going to do is that alert body. Remember, I told you about that in the table view, and what this is the text of the reminder. In other words, if we want to write a reminder to feed the dog, that's what this alert body is going to contain. So to do that, we do a local notification dot alert body, and that's going to be equal to the underscore intertext.text. That's the text information that we put in our text box in this view controller. Next thing we want to do is create a fire date. So we do a local notification dot fire date, and that's going to be the picker date that we just created a couple lines above here. Now we need to set the time zone, and we want to set the time zone to the user's local time zone. So we do a local notification, I keep doing that same mistake there, dot time zone, and we want to set that, and we need brackets for this. We need an NS time zone, and then we want to use the default time zone. And we can also add a sound too. So let's go ahead and do a local notification dot sound name. And we typically use we need to do a parentheses here, and this will be a UI local notification default sound name. That's what we typically use. Now, one thing you want to keep in mind here, though, please note that sounds will not play if you're running on a simulator. If you have a provisioning profile and you're hooked up to a device, then you'll hear the sound when the notification fires. Otherwise, this isn't going to work, so just keep that in mind. So the next thing we want to do is create what's called a badge number. You know, that's the little red dot that hovers over the corner of the icon and indicates that you've got activity on that particular application. So once again, it's a local notification dot application badge number, and we want to make that equal to 1. Now, another note about this. This will set the icon badge number to 1, but please note that in iOS, the badge numbers won't be incremented with local notifications. Only push notifications can be incremented. So what does this really mean? So say you have 4 notifications that fire off before you can open the app. The badge count will only show 1, not 4, not 5, not anything. It'll only show 1. And this kind of bugs me, and I don't understand what the technical reason behind it is and why Apple can't make this happen, but it is what it is. So just keep in mind that on local notifications, your badge number is not going to increase. Okay, so the last thing we can do is a repeat interval. So once again, we'll start off with a local notification dot repeat interval. So what's this all about? Let's say I want to create a notification to remind me to take medication at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and I want that to be a daily reminder, for example. I can set the repeat notification up to daily, or let's say if I want it every minute or every month or something. So what we do here is we use an NS calendar unit here, so that would be an NS, if I wanted to make it daily, I'd use the NS day calendar unit. But let's change that to NS minute calendar unit, and I'm going to comment this out for right now so it doesn't run. We'll come back to this a little bit later and explore how this works in more detail a little bit later. So next we need to schedule our notification, and to do that we need a double bracket, and that's a UI application. And once again, we're going to call the shared application, and then we use a schedule local notifications. And then we use this bottom guy here because the notification that we want to schedule is what we created above here, the UI local notification. So we need to put local notification in that spot. And the last thing we need to do is dismiss our view controller, and as always we do that with a self dismiss modal view controller animated yes nil like so. So let's build and run, see what we have here. We have our table view. So let's go ahead and add a reminder. And let's say that we want to do this reminder on Wednesday, November 13th at 10:59 a.m. And our reminder is going to be feed the dog. For lack of a more creative reminder, we'll do a save. And now we have feed the dog in our reminder. And we also have our date object. But one thing to notice here, date's kind of hard to understand. The date's pretty good, 2013, 11/13, but the time, that's in universal coordinated time. So we can live with the date, but the time format is kind of goofy. And this isn't very user friendly, so I think it'd be a good idea for us to modify this data set to something that's more legible for the viewer. But before we leave this view to make those modifications, there's something that I wanted to point out. Unless we want to create a custom UI table view, which is something we don't want to do, then there is a limitation that we have to be cognizant about. We only have two string placeholders. The feed the dog, that's one, and then this NS date, that's two. So that's going to pose a challenge for us. So just keep that in mind when we go to address this. So let's go ahead and get busy with our changes, and to do so we need to jump back to our view reminders view controller implementation file. So let's close that out and we'll jump back over to our implementation file. So all our modifications, of course, are going to be performed in the cell for row at index path. So let's start out there. So what we're going to do, what we need to do, is to break down our NS date into a date element and a time element. Once that's done, then we'll be able to format each in whatever way we want. So what we'll do first is to create two instances of NS date formatter, one for our date and one for our time element, and then we can set the format respectively. So let's put that right after the UI local notification, and we're going to create an NS date formatter. And we'll find that guy right there. And we'll call this first one our date formatter. And what we need to do is an alloc and a init. So that's init date formatter, alloc, init. And that takes care of that line. And then we need to set the style, and we're going to set the style to a medium style, which is a pretty good style for a date. And by the way, you can experiment with this, with the different styles on your own. But what we need to do is a bracket, and we'll use our date formatter, and then we'll call the method set style. And then we need a parenthesis, and this is an NS date formatter, and we're going to use the formatter medium style. And as I indicated, see, there's several styles here that you can play around and choose whatever you want, but the medium style is a pretty good style, so we're going to use that guy here. Okay, now we're going to allocate and initialize our formatter for our time element. It's basically the same thing, so we're going to do an NS date format, and once again we want to go up here to the formatter, and this time it's going to be called a time formatter, and once again we're just going to alloc and initialize it, so we can just copy what's up above there and do that real quick since I'm such a terrible typist. And then once again we need to apply that, and we're going to do a time formatter, and then this time we're going to use a set date style, but we're going to use the set date format, and then we're going to type a format in. The format I like to use, we need to do a string here, and that's going to be an H for hour followed by a colon, and then MM for minute, and then a space, and we use an A, and that A represents AM or PM. And to find out what these codes are, you can go up to do a search on Unicode formats at Google, and you can get all this information up there. And you can play around with the different styles. Okay, so now we're ready to create two new string objects, one to hold our formatted date and the other one to hold our formatted time. So we do NSString, and the first one is going to be, we're going to use this for fire date, so let's just call this fire date, fire date, and that's going to be date formatter, and then we're going to use the string from date method, and the date is going to be notification dot fire date. And the next one is we want to do a fire time, so once again ns string, and then we'll call this fire time equals, and it's the same thing as above, we're going to use the time formatter, and then we're going to use the string from date, and this will be notification dot fire date. And that'll give us the time. Okay, so now recall from our discussion a few minutes ago when we were talking about the limitations in the table view is that we only have two placeholders for strings in our standard table view cell. But now we have three strings. We have our reminder name, our date name, our time name. So what do we do now? Well, the answer is we need to be a little creative here and append our formatted date string and our time string into one new string. So we'll call this new string date time, and it's coded like this. We do an NS string, and then we're going to call this date time. This is going to be our new string that combines the two. And we do an NS string with format, NS string. I just want just a plain old NS string here. Oh, I'm missing my bracket, that's what. So I need an NS string with format, and now I'm going to do a format, and here's what we do here. We'll do an @ parentheses, and we need a placeholder, and another @ and let's just put a dash in there to separate the two, and then the next one will be %@ with the closing parentheses. Now, whoops, we forgot something here. We need a comma, and then we need to put in our information here, and we want to append the fire date plus the fire time. So fire date, and then parentheses, fire time. Yep. Fire time. And that should append those two together. So finally, we need to append those, or actually we need to use that new string and put that in our detailed text label. So we do that by cell.detailed text label set text, and we want to use the date time. Now we already have that up here above, so we're going to have to comment that out. So let's go find that, and that's right here. Okay, let's build and run, see what we have now. Okay, now you can tell it's a little bit easier to read. November 13th, 2013 at 10:59 a.m. So that looks pretty good. There's still a few more things that we need to do. Since we want the ability to delete our notifications, we need to uncomment the table view commit editing style method and add some special code which will cancel a specific notification. So let's do that now. And we'll close this guy out, and we need to jump back over to our table view, which is where we are. So let's scroll down and find the method that we need to uncomment, and that is the table view commit editing style, and that's right here. So let's go ahead and uncomment this guy, and we can get rid of this else if statement. We don't need that. Now What we need to do in this method, recall, is we need to really do two things. We need to not only delete the row in the table view, but we also need to cancel the scheduled notification, and that cancel of the scheduled notification has to be accomplished first. So let's go ahead and make ourselves a little bit of room here and take care of that. And to do so, the first thing we need to do is create an array of our notifications. So let's do NS array, and we'll call this array notification array. And we need to do a bracket, a couple of brackets, and that's a UI application. We grab that from the shared application once again. And we're calling the scheduled notifications. So the next thing we need to do is we need to grab the object at the row we selected and cancel that notification. So that's going to take a couple of brackets, UI application, once again the shared application, and we want to say cancel local notification, and then it's asking us for a parameter here, and for that parameter we're going to use our array, notification array, and then we want to use the object at index path dot row. Okay, so now we can bring this up here, and now we can go ahead and leave this other line in there which deletes the row from the table view. So the last thing we need to add to this method is a line to reload the table view data. So let's put that in. So that's a self.tableview reload data. Okay, I think we're ready to build and run again. And we have feed the dog. Let's see if we can delete it. And we swipe and delete. It's gone. Let's go ahead and add another guy. And we'll do this Tuesday at 12:50 p.m. And we're going to make a trip to Mars. And we'll go ahead and save. And now we have our trip to Mars. So there's one more thing that we need to take care of before we wrap up the session, and that has to do with badging. We want to clear the badge once the application has been opened, so let's do that now. And just so you know, in the new version of Xcode, Xcode 5, you don't have the device frame available to you. So how do we see that badge if we want? Well, we have to do what's called a Shift Command H, and that takes us there. And this is what I'm talking about when I say a badge. You see like the one around RX Manager? That's the badge there. So let's go ahead and stop this build. And we need to go to our project navigator. And this time we need to go visit our app-delegate M file. So when we first launch our application, we want to ensure that the badge count is set back to 0. And to do that, we just add a simple little statement here. And once again, we do a UI application and call the shared application. And we're going to use a property this time, and that's a dot application badge number, and we'll set that property to 0. Let's go ahead and copy that statement because we're going to use that again, because most of the time our application will be residing in the background. So we also want to add that property when the application, or add that method rather, or that statement rather, when the application becomes active again. So let's scroll down to the application did become active, and we'll add that method here as well. Okay, so we're good to go. Okay, so now let's go ahead and build and run, and let's experiment a little bit with our application. So we have our application here, and we have 2 test reminders in here. Let's add another one, and let's make this test 3. And we're going to make that, it's 12:16 now, we're going to make that hit at 12:18. So I'll save it, and that's a minute from now. But in order to see this reminder, we're going to have to go into the inactive state. So just FYI, you know that in Xcode 5 there's not a device framework associated with this, so we need to do a Shift Command H to put this in inactive mode. So you see we already have one local notification badge number here from our previous one. So as soon as this hits 12:18, it will fire off a banner for us, but as I indicated earlier, that badge number will not change. It's going to remain at 1 because this is a local notification and not a push notification. So another thing to keep cognizant of is the fact that once it hits 12:18 when our notification should fire, doesn't mean it's going to hit immediately. It can be any time within the next 50 seconds, let's say. So let's see when that does. It is on 12:18 now. So sometime within the next 40 seconds, there it is, local notifications, test 1. So let's experiment with the repeat functionality, and to do so, let's get out of here and we'll stop this. And let's go back to the view reminder the add reminder view controller, and remember that we had commented out this repeat interval. You see that I just now uncommented it. So we have it set to NS minute counter unit. So that notification should repeat automatically now. So let's go ahead and run it again. And once again, this is test 3 that we're concerned about, but we have to do a Shift Command H to put this in the background in order for us. And you see that when we opened it up, we lost our badge information, which is exactly what's supposed to happen. So within the next minute, that notification should fire again, and that'll keep firing forever. And there's our notification. So it looks like everything is working the way it's supposed to. Okay, so there's obviously a lot to experiment with when creating UI local notifications. Things like repeat intervals, sounds, and the different ways to fire a notification, including a method called date from time interval, which in effect gives you a countdown timer to perform the notification. I'll put it to you to check these things out on your own to really master this feature. You'll use it a lot in your developmental efforts. So there are 3 things I want you to remember. First, notifications won't fire unless the application is running in the background. Please don't waste time waiting for the notification to fire while you're staring at an open application. Second, to send an application into the background while using the simulator, use the Shift Command H keys. And third, when firing local notifications, the application badge number will not increment. I know there are several so-called recommendations on Stack Overflow, but I've tried them all and I can't get any to work. So if you can get something to work, please let me know. So that wraps it up for this session. I love it when you give me the thumbs up, and I love all your comments too. So thanks for watching, and please don't forget to subscribe.